And joining me now is retired General Michael Hayden, former director of the CIA and the NSA, and author of the new book, The Assault on Intelligence, American National Security in an Age of Lies. Good morning, Director Hayden. It's always great to see you. You heard Senator Rubio there. Do you think this summit should go forward, and do you think the U.S. will get anything out of it?
So, I wasn't a fan when we went out onto the north lawn on the driveway and made a spur-of-the-moment decision to go do this. I thought a lot of preparation needed to have been done before you make that decision. We've done that. We're pretty far along now. And so, on balance, I'm modestly in favor of this going forward. And on balance, I'm modestly thinking it's more rather than less likely that it will happen. Now, we had the dust-up this past week over rhetoric going back and forth. And frankly, our rhetoric was just as harsh as the North Koreans when the vice president promised to Libya them if they didn't come to the table and give up their nuclear weapons.
And certainly the North Koreans took note of that and thought, uh-oh, they're trying for regime change, or I could die eventually. Do you think Vice President Pence and John Bolton said that on purpose, or were they just off their talking points?
I don't know. I don't have evidence that they said that on purpose. I think the implication is that they opposed the meeting, and this was their way of undercutting the likelihood that it would happen. I don't know that. I think it does, however, sound like the vice president and sound like the ambassador. These are the kinds of things that they say. So it may not have been a plan. It may just have been spontaneous commentary from both of them.
And part of the president's letter to Kim Jong-un when he canceled it, he said, I felt a wonderful dialogue was building up between you and me, and ultimately it is only that dialogue that matters. Was that sort of don't listen to Vice President Pence?
I think it is. Let's you and I get together. You and I are the only ones who can solve this. But I think therein, Martha, therein lies the real danger, not the rhetoric and the spirit as we go into this. It's what will happen at this meeting. In this sense, I totally agree with Senator Rubio, all right? These folks are not going to get rid of all of their nuclear weapons. And if President Trump's brand, and that's the right word here, going into this meeting demands something like that, this is going to end up in a very bad place. I think the realistic expectation for the meeting is that you do something at the beginning, not the end of a process, that you begin to stabilize the Korean problem, not solve it.
Is that why we've heard President Trump say this week, well, maybe we don't have to denuclearize all at once? I'd like to do that. I may not. So realistically, if they come out of that meeting, if they have the meeting, and they come out, do they just call it something different? Does the president say denuclearization and Kim tells his people it's arms control?
Well, I hope that's where we come out. I think that's the most optimistic scenario. You have the meeting, everyone smiles, everyone shakes hands, and everyone agrees on a work program that they give to their staffs that move the Korean Peninsula in a direction of being more stable, more transparent, less prone to war. But I don't think we're going to have a parade of missiles or weapons going through some destruction site that we can put on camera.
And you talked about preparation for this meeting, and if it's June 12th, I know they're kind of scrambling to get this back on track. Do you think the president is prepared for the summit? You say in your book, the president's instinct toward action, his impatience with process, his lack of interest in history, his focus on winning, his obsession with protecting the Trump brand, as you just mentioned, in this case, toughness, all that could conspire to create a very bad decision. Yeah. So what could go wrong here?
That is something that I fear. Now, the president, as you suggested in his letter, talks about the one-on-one conversation as being the key to this. I know one of the ones is going to be very, very prepared. Kim Jong-un knows his program inside and out. I think he knows what he can concede and what it means and what he cannot concede. I don't know that the president has done the kind of homework that would allow him to do this. Hence, my hope, the high watermark, is that they stay at the level of principles. They talk about denuclearization, allow each side to kind of cower within the ambiguity of denuclearization, and then, seriously, begin a process that makes the peninsula less dangerous than it is today.
You know the North Koreans well. You dealt with them when you were with President Bush. Do you really trust them, and and trust or not trust, and I'm going to assume your answer is no, not really.
Right.
So how do you do verifiable denuclearization.
So there are two steps here, all right? Well, one is less dangerous, all right? Maybe limits, maybe moratoria on testing. And then the other one is inspection. And we've never had as much success with the North Koreans with regard to inspection as we have with any other nuclear negotiation.
Does he really need to test anymore? I mean, most people I talk to in the intelligence community now say we just assume he.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And look, it's an interesting way to look at the last 18 months, all right? I give the president full credit for amping up the pressure, the diplomatic isolation, the sanctions, the pushing the Chinese, the military demonstrations, all that good. The rhetoric, Rocket Man, not useful, narrowed the margin for error. But all the increased pressure was good to force them in the direction of the table. But Martha, another reason I think they're willing to get at the table is that those same 18 months, we have seen the greatest progress in North Korean nuclear weapons and ballistic missile technology that we've ever seen. He's kind of gotten where he needs to be. He's willing to park the car for now and then go talk.
Okay, and I want to turn to the FBI and the Department of Justice and that intelligence briefing on Capitol Hill about what President Trump has said, this FBI informant, that there was a spy in the Trump campaign. What do you think of the president's comments on that?
Yeah, I think he's simply trying to delegitimize the Mueller investigation, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and he's willing to throw almost anything against the wall. Martha, this is part of a stream. Remember wiretapping Trump Tower, unmasking U.S. identities, FISA applications that were abused, and now we have this. By the way, all of those are wrong. All of those are incorrect. All of those are stunningly normal in the development of intelligence and law enforcement. But you know what? I talk to a lot of people in the country. And for a lot of people in the country, one or another or many of those things have already stuck.
It totally resonates. So if, as you say, all of those things are wrong, how do people counter that?
Well, I mean, you have folks like myself or others with some experience going on, perhaps without a dog in the fight. We're not in this government. I was not in the Obama administration. I've got nothing to defend there. I'm just trying to point out what are the normal processes and how these do or do not meet what it is we always do when we face these kinds of problems. And from the outside looking in, on the surface, from everything I know, everyone has handled this just about the way it should have been handled.
Just very quickly, I want to ask you about the comment from former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, who did work under President Obama. Listen to what he said on Wednesday.
Knowing what I know of what the Russians did, the massive effort that they undertook, it stretches credulity, as I said in the book, and logic that not to think that they didn't help swing the election, given the fact that it turned on less than 80,000 votes in 3 states.
I don't know whether you agree with him or not.
Look, I agree that the Russians affected the election. But how much they affected is not just unknown, it is unknowable, and so we should stop talking about it. Donald Trump is the president.
Which I was just going to ask you, so you think it is inappropriate for a former intelligence agency?
I do not say that.
Without evidence.
Look, we are here. You invite folks like us on your show because we're the fact witnesses, not because we have opinions.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us, Director Hayden, this morning. When we come back, I'll have the